At our luxury anniversary dinner, my husband handed me divorce papers, and my revenge was epic. My name is Undine, and I am 34 years old. 8 years of marriage led me to that elegant restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, wearing my favorite red dress, my hair curled perfectly, believing this night would be magical. Derek held my hand across the table, his smile warm, but his eyes hiding something I could not yet see. I did not know that inside his jacket pocket sat divorce papers meant to destroy me in front of everyone we knew. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from tonight. Drop your city in the comments below. If stories about betrayal and sweet revenge speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now let me take you back to where this journey truly began. Growing up in a small town in Ohio taught me the value of hard work before I even understood what the words meant. My father worked at the local factory, his hands always rough and calloused, but his heart was the softest thing I knew. He would come home exhausted every evening, yet he never missed reading me a bedtime story. He called me his little warrior, said I had fire in my soul that would take me places he could only dream about. When I was 12 years old, everything changed. A machinery accident at the factory took my father from us in an instant. One morning, he kissed my forehead and told me to have a good day at school. By evening, he was gone. My mother received a small settlement that barely covered the funeral costs. She took on 2 jobs immediately cleaning houses during the day and waitressing at a diner until midnight. I watched her come home with swollen feet and tired eyes, never complaining, always making sure my brother and I had enough to eat. Those years shaped me into who I became. I studied harder than anyone in my class, not because I loved books, but because I understood that education was my only ticket out of poverty. My teachers noticed my determination. They wrote recommendation letters and helped me apply for scholarships. When the acceptance letter from Boston University arrived along with a full scholarship, my mother cried for an hour straight. She kept saying my father was watching from heaven, proud of his little warrior. College in Boston was overwhelming at first. I had never seen buildings so tall or people moving so fast. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, while I felt like an imposter wearing borrowed confidence. I worked 3 part-time jobs throughout my 4 years there, tutoring wealthy students, serving coffee at a campus cafe, and cleaning offices at night. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford, but I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a prestigious investment firm. The work was demanding, the hours brutal, but I climbed steadily. Within 5 years, I had saved enough money and built enough connections to take the biggest risk of my life. I started my own financial consulting firm. Those first months were terrifying. I operated out of a tiny office that barely fit a desk and 2 chairs. I ate ramen noodles for dinner more often than I care to admit. But slowly, clients came. They appreciated my honest approach and my dedication to their success. My firm grew from just me to a team of 7 people. That was when I met Derek. He walked into my life at a networking event downtown. I was there trying to find new clients, feeling slightly out of place among the Harvard graduates and old money families. Derek approached me with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, but somehow on him, it seemed charming. He was tall with dark hair and blue eyes that sparkled when he laughed. He introduced himself as a lawyer at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, and then he asked me about my work with genuine interest. Most men I met at those events talked about themselves endlessly. Derek listened. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details I mentioned and brought them up later. When the event ended, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. What followed was the most romantic pursuit I had ever experienced. Derek sent flowers to my office every single day for 3 months. Not just roses, but carefully arranged bouquets with handwritten notes that quoted poetry and referenced our conversations. He took me on dates that felt like scenes from movies. A moonlit boat ride on the Charles River where he brought champagne and strawberries. a picnic in Boston Common where he had hired a violinist to play my favorite songs, a surprise trip to New York just to see a Broadway show I had mentioned wanting to watch. He told me things that made my heart soar. He said meeting me had changed his entire perspective on life. He said he had dated plenty of women from wealthy families, but none of them had my fire, my ambition, my authenticity. He said I was the only woman who had ever made him want to become a better man. After a year of dating, Derek proposed at the top of Cadillac Mountain in Maine during sunrise. We had hiked up in the darkness, and as the first light spread across the sky, he dropped to one knee. The ring was stunning, a cushion-cut diamond that caught the morning light perfectly. I said yes before he even finished asking. Our wedding was small but beautiful, held at a vineyard in Martha's Vineyard during autumn, when the leaves were turning gold and crimson. My mother sat in the front row, crying happy tears, telling everyone who would listen that her daughter had found a prince. Derek's family attended too, his mother Greta and his sister Simone, though I noticed they seemed less enthusiastic than my side of the family. I dismissed it as them being reserved New Englanders. I was too happy to let anything dampen my joy. The first 3 years of our marriage felt like an extended honeymoon. Derek supported my business with advice and connections. He celebrated every new client I landed, every milestone my firm achieved. We bought our first apartment together in Back Bay, a beautiful space with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the street. We traveled to Paris for our first anniversary, to Santorini, for our second to the Maldives for our third. Each trip was filled with laughter and romance and promises of forever. I felt protected and cherished in a way I had never experienced before. Derek would wrap his arms around me at night and tell me he was the luckiest man alive. I would fall asleep smiling, certain that I had found my person, my partner, my happy ending. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Derek started working late more often around our 4th year of marriage. He blamed demanding clients and upcoming partner decisions. I understood pressure and ambition, so I supported him without question. I kept dinner warm, stayed up late waiting for him, never once doubted his explanations. I was too in love to see what was happening right in front of my eyes. The shift in our marriage happened so gradually that I almost did not notice at first. Derek received his promotion to partner at his law firm shortly after our 4th anniversary. I was incredibly proud of him. I organized a celebration dinner with his colleagues, and our friends toasted to his success, bragged about my brilliant husband to anyone who would listen. But something changed after that promotion. It was like a switch flipped inside him, and suddenly the man I married began disappearing. The criticism started small. We attended a firm event, and on the drive home, Derek mentioned that my dress was not quite right for the occasion. He said the other partners' wives wore designer labels, and perhaps I should invest in a better wardrobe. I was surprised, but not alarmed. I went shopping that weekend and bought several expensive dresses I could barely afford because I wanted to make him proud. At the next event, he complained about my makeup. It was too subtle, he said. I needed to look more polished, more put together. So I started spending extra time getting ready, watching tutorials online, buying products I had never used before. Still, it was never enough. There was always something wrong. My hair was too casual. My jewelry was not impressive enough. I laughed too loudly at someone's joke. I did not laugh enough at someone else's. What hurt most was how he introduced me at these gatherings. In the early years, Derek would beam with pride when presenting me to his colleagues. He would talk about my business, my achievements, how I had built something from nothing. Now he mumbled my name quickly and moved on to other topics. Sometimes he forgot to introduce me at all, leaving me standing awkwardly beside him while he networked as if I were invisible. I started comparing myself to the other wives constantly. Jessica, married to a senior partner, always looked flawless in her designer outfits. Amanda, wife of another associate, had perfect hair and spoke fluent French. I tried to emulate them, spent money I should have saved, lost hours I could have invested in my business. None of it mattered. Derek found new things to criticize every time. His mother, Greta, made everything worse. From the beginning, she had treated me with barely concealed disdain. During our early dating months, she would ask pointed questions about my family background, her nose wrinkling slightly at my answers. When Derek proposed, she pulled him aside and had a long conversation that left him looking uncomfortable for days. He never told me what she said, but I suspected she disapproved of his choice. After the wedding, Greta's disapproval became more overt. At our monthly family dinners at her estate in Beacon Hill, she would make comments that cut like paper, small enough to dismiss individually, but devastating in accumulation. She would praise Derek's ex-girlfriend Natasha, daughter of a shipping magnate, mention how lovely she looked at some charity event. She would ask when we planned to have children, then look at me suspiciously as if I were deliberately denying her grandchildren. Her favorite topic was my background. She found countless subtle ways to remind everyone that I came from nothing. She would ask about my mother's health with exaggerated concern, then mention how difficult it must be for her living alone in that small town in Ohio. She would inquire about my business, her tone suggesting it was a quaint hobby rather than a legitimate enterprise. She once asked if I ever felt out of place at important social events, given that I had not grown up attending them like the other wives had. Simone, Derek's younger sister, was equally unkind. She would whisper with her mother across the dinner table, both of them glancing at me and smiling in ways that made my stomach churn. Simone had married into another wealthy Boston family, and she wore her privilege like armor. She would drop names of designers and vacation destinations, knowing I could not match her references. She would reminisce about childhood memories with Derek that deliberately excluded me, making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Derek never defended me against them. Not once. When his mother made her cutting remarks, he either laughed along or changed the subject without acknowledging my discomfort. When Simone rolled her eyes at something, I said he pretended not to notice. I brought this up to him once after a particularly painful dinner where Greta had spent 20 minutes discussing the importance of proper breeding in raising successful children. Derek dismissed my concerns completely. He said I was being too sensitive, that his mother did not mean anything by her comments, that I needed to learn to take a joke. He said I should try harder to fit in with his family instead of expecting them to accommodate my background. I cried in our bathroom that night, wondering what I had done wrong, what I could do better, how I could earn their acceptance. My own business, the thing I had built with my blood and sweat and sleepless nights, became another source of conflict. In our early marriage, Derek had been my biggest supporter. He understood the challenges of building something from nothing because he had watched his own father build the family's real estate portfolio. But somewhere along the way, his support turned to condescension. He started referring to my firm as my little project. He would compare my revenue to his salary, pointing out that he earned 3 times what my entire company brought in, yet I worked more hours than he did. He suggested, then insisted, that I should sell the business and focus on being a proper wife. He said his position at the firm required a certain type of spouse, someone who could dedicate time to charity boards and social engagements and home management. My constant working was embarrassing to him, he said. It made him look like he could not provide for his family. I refused to sell. My company was not just a source of income, but a piece of my soul. It represented everything I had overcome, every obstacle I had conquered. It was proof that the little girl from Ohio could compete with anyone in Boston's financial world. Giving it up would mean giving up a part of myself. Derek's reaction to my refusal was cold fury. He did not yell or throw things. He simply stopped speaking to me for an entire week. He slept on the far edge of our bed, left for work before I woke up, came home after I was already asleep. When I tried to apologize to find a compromise, he looked at me with something close to disgust. Eventually, I caved. I apologized for being stubborn, for not considering his feelings, for prioritizing work over our marriage. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I said them because I wanted peace. I said them because I still loved him. The late nights became more frequent after Derek made partner. He would call at 8 saying he had a client dinner. He would text at 10 saying the meeting was running long. He would slip into bed after midnight, careful not to wake me, though I was almost always awake and pretending to sleep. I never questioned him. I trusted him completely. I told myself that his dedication to work was admirable, that the sacrifices now would pay off later, that we were building a future together. I would wait for him in our kitchen, keeping his dinner warm, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. When he finally came home, he would eat quickly, without really tasting the food. He would answer my questions about his day with one-word responses. He would go straight to bed without kissing me goodnight, saying he was too exhausted for conversation. I would clean up the dishes alone, turn off the lights, and crawl into bed next to a man who felt increasingly like a stranger. The loneliness was profound. I lived in a beautiful apartment with a successful husband, yet I felt more alone than I had during my poorest days in college. At least back then I had friends who checked on me, classmates who shared meals and study sessions and dreams. Now I had Derek's colleagues who looked through me, Derek's family, who looked down on me, and Derek himself, who barely looked at me at all. I made excuses for him constantly. He was stressed, he was ambitious, he was building a career that would benefit both of us. I told myself that this was just a phase, that the Derek I married was still in there somewhere, that he would come back to me once things settled down at work. I told myself that every marriage had rough patches, that ours was not fundamentally broken, that love could survive anything if I just tried hard enough. I was wrong about all of it. The phone call from Paulette came on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. I was at my office reviewing quarterly reports when my cell phone buzzed with her name. Paulette and I had been friends since our freshman year of college. We had survived final exams and bad dates and one disastrous spring break trip together. She became a family law attorney, one of the best in Massachusetts, and I trusted her more than almost anyone. Her voice sounded strange when I answered. Tight, careful. She said she needed to see me immediately, that it was important, that she could not discuss it over the phone. I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest, but assumed it was about a case she wanted to discuss, maybe seeking financial expertise on some divorce proceeding. I met her at our usual coffee shop, a quiet place near the Common, where we had spent countless hours over the years. Paulette was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back corner, her hands wrapped around a mug she was not drinking from. She looked up when I approached, and something in her expression made my heart stop. She did not waste time with pleasantries. She told me that one of her colleagues from another firm had been at a restaurant in the South End the previous week, a romantic place, expensive, the kind of spot people go for special occasions. Her colleague had noticed Derek at a table in the corner because Derek had represented her brother in a business matter years ago. But Derek was not alone. He was with a young woman, probably mid-20s, blonde hair, laughing at everything he said. And at some point during their meal, he leaned across the table and kissed her. I stared at Paulette, unable to process what she was saying. My husband, kissing another woman, in public, wearing his wedding ring, the ring I had placed on his finger 8 years ago. It did not make sense. Derek loved me. Derek was difficult sometimes, critical, sometimes distant sometimes, but he would never cheat on me. There had to be a mistake. Paulette reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her colleague had taken a photo, she explained apologetically. Not to be cruel, but because she thought Paulette should know, should tell me, should help me. Paulette turned the screen toward me, and there it was. Derek, unmistakably Derek, leaning close to a woman who was definitely not me. Their lips were touching. His hand was on her cheek. The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. I asked Paulette if she was certain if there could be any other explanation, if maybe this was some work-related situation that looked different than it was. Even as I asked, I knew I was grasping at delusions. That photo left no room for innocent interpretations. Paulette held my hand while I cried. She did not offer false comfort or empty reassurances. She simply sat with me as my world crumbled, passing me napkins and letting me process the unprocessable. When my tears finally slowed, she asked what I wanted to do next. I said I did not know. I said I needed more information. I needed to understand what was happening before I decided anything. That night, I called my cousin Nathan. He lived in New York and worked as a private investigator, a profession our family initially found embarrassing, but eventually proved invaluable. Nathan had helped uncover insurance fraud for one of my clients and was brilliant at finding information people wanted hidden. I told him everything Paulette had shared with me. His response was immediate. He would be in Boston in 2 days. Nathan worked discreetly for the next 2 weeks. He followed Derek, photographed his movements, dug into financial records and property databases. Each day he sent me updates, and each day the picture became clearer and more devastating. The woman's name was Celeste. She was 26 years old, a junior associate at Derek's law firm. Fresh out of law school, bright and ambitious, exactly the type Derek would have noticed. They had been involved for over a year, according to Nathan's findings. Derek took her to restaurants on the nights he told me he was working late. He bought her jewelry with money from accounts I thought were for our future. He had even rented her an apartment in the South End, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows, paying the lease from a personal account I never knew existed. But the affair was not the worst of Nathan's discoveries. Derek had been systematically dismantling our financial life without my knowledge. Our joint savings account, which should have held over $200,000, contained barely $50,000. Derek had been transferring money to his personal accounts for months. Our investment portfolio, which I thought was growing steadily, had been partially liquidated. Derek sold stocks we owned together and pocketed the proceeds. The apartment in Back Bay, our home, the place where we had built years of memories, was no longer in both our names. Derek had formed a shell company and somehow transferred the property deed. If we divorced, he could claim the apartment had nothing to do with our marriage. I would get nothing, and there was more. Nathan found 3 loans totaling $200,000, all taken out under my name using my Social Security number. I had never applied for these loans. I had never seen a single penny from them. Derek had forged documents, committed fraud, burdened me with debt I did not know existed. The night I received Nathan's full report, I sat alone in my office until well past midnight. The building was empty except for the security guard downstairs. The city lights twinkled outside my window, indifferent to my shattered world. I read every page of the report multiple times, hoping to find something, anything, that would make this less terrible than it appeared. There was nothing. My husband was not just unfaithful. He was a thief. He was a fraud. He was systematically destroying me while smiling to my face and telling me he loved me. Every late night, every missed dinner, every distracted conversation suddenly made sense. He was building a new life with Celeste while stripping me of everything I had earned. I wanted to confront him immediately. I wanted to storm home and throw the evidence in his face. I wanted to scream and cry and demand explanations. But Paulette's voice echoed in my mind. Not yet, she had said when I called her with the findings. You need to be strategic. You need to prepare. You cannot give him any warning. So I dried my tears. I took a deep breath, and I began to plan. My first meeting with Harriet Monroe took place in her corner office overlooking the harbor. She was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for destroying cheating spouses in court. Paulette had called her the best divorce attorney in Massachusetts, and after 5 minutes of conversation, I understood why. Harriet listened to my story without interrupting her expression, revealing nothing. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. A wolf's smile. A predator recognizing wounded prey. She outlined Derek's legal exposure with clinical precision. Transferring marital assets without spousal consent was illegal in Massachusetts. The property fraud alone could result in criminal charges. The loans taken in my name constituted identity theft and financial fraud, serious felonies that could land Derek in prison. His law license would be revoked. His career would be finished. Harriet explained our strategy. We would document everything meticulously. We would file nothing until the moment was right. We would let Derek believe his plan was working while building an airtight case against him. When we finally struck, he would have no time to hide assets or destroy evidence. The divorce would be swift and brutal, and I would walk away with everything I deserved. I signed a retainer agreement that afternoon. Harriet's fees were substantial, but I would have paid 10 times as much to watch Derek face consequences for what he had done. The following weeks were an exercise in patience and deception. I went home each night and played the role of loving wife. I smiled at Derek over dinner and asked about his day. I pretended not to notice when he typed messages under the table, probably to Celeste. I lay beside him in bed, feeling his body heat, remembering when his presence brought me comfort instead of nausea. During the days I worked on protecting what was mine, my accountant helped me clearly document that my consulting firm was established before our marriage and built entirely with my own capital. Derek had no legal claim to it. We established new accounts in my name alone and transferred my business revenues there. We reported the fraudulent loans to the bank and filed a police complaint. The investigation would take months, but a paper trail was being created. Nathan continued his surveillance. He gathered more photographs, more evidence of Derek's double life. He recorded conversations through legal means, capturing Derek boasting to Celeste about his divorce plan. I listened to my husband call me naive and stupid, laughing about how I suspected nothing. I heard Celeste call me pathetic, wondering how I could be so blind. Each recording hardened my resolve. Through a combination of Nathan's work and my own careful observation, I discovered Derek's timeline. He planned to serve me divorce papers on our 8th anniversary. The setting would be our celebratory dinner at one of Boston's finest restaurants. His mother and sister would be there to witness my humiliation. He wanted to break me publicly to show everyone that he was the one in control, that I was nothing without him. The cruelty of this plan stole my breath when I first understood it. 8 years of marriage, and he wanted to end it by humiliating me in front of everyone we knew. He wanted to see me cry, wanted to watch me crumble, wanted to exit our marriage as the clear victor in some twisted competition I never knew we were playing. I decided to give him exactly the opposite. Over the next month, I made careful arrangements. I contacted the restaurant manager, an old college acquaintance named Thomas, and explained a modified version of my situation. I told him I needed some technical equipment set up discreetly for a surprise during our anniversary dinner. He was happy to help. I arranged for Harriet to attend the dinner as an apparent stranger at a nearby table. Nathan would be with her, along with recording equipment. I also invited Maggie, a journalist friend who covered business and society news. She would document everything that transpired. I bought a new red dress more stunning than anything I had ever worn. I booked appointments for hair and makeup, determined to look my absolute best. If Derek wanted a spectacle, I would give him one he would never forget. The night before our anniversary, I lay awake planning my words. I rehearsed my calm. I visualized the moment Derek would realize his plan had failed. I imagined the fear spreading across his face as he understood that he was the one trapped, not me. For the first time in months, I fell asleep smiling. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a historic building near the waterfront. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. White tablecloths draped over round tables surrounded by velvet chairs. Tall windows offered views of the harbor where boats bobbed gently in the evening light. Everything about the space whispered wealth and sophistication. Derek had chosen well for his performance. I arrived at 7:30 precisely on time. My red dress flowed around me like liquid fire. My hair was swept into an elegant updo. My makeup was flawless, highlighting my features without looking overdone. I felt powerful and dangerous and utterly calm. Derek waited near the entrance, looking handsome in his custom suit. He kissed my cheek and complimented my appearance, his eyes sliding over me with something that might have been appreciation or might have been contempt. I smiled and thanked him and took his arm as we walked to our table. The guests were already assembled. Greta sat at the head of the table in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. Simone occupied the seat beside her, whispering something that made them both laugh. Derek's colleagues filled other chairs with their polished wives. A few of our mutual friends were scattered around people I genuinely liked, who had no idea what was about to happen. I scanned the room subtly. Harriet and Nathan sat at a table near the back, appearing to be a professional couple enjoying dinner. Maggie was positioned near the bar, nursing a glass of wine and watching everything with journalist eyes. Thomas had set up the projection equipment behind a decorative screen, invisible unless you knew to look for it. The first course arrived, an elegant arrangement of seafood on delicate plates. Conversation flowed around me, and I participated smoothly, laughing at jokes and sharing anecdotes, as if this were any other social dinner. Derek played the devoted husband, refilling my wine glass and resting his hand on mine between bites. Greta watched us with poorly disguised satisfaction. She thought she knew what was coming. She was wrong. The main course was served a perfectly prepared fillet that I barely tasted. My awareness had shifted to a heightened state, noticing every detail around me. Derek checked his watch twice. Simone kept glancing at her brother with barely contained excitement. The air felt thick with anticipation that everyone attributed to anniversary celebration. Finally, as the dessert plates were cleared, Derek pushed back his chair and stood. He lifted his champagne glass, and the table fell silent. Here it comes, I thought. My heart was racing, but my face remained serene. Derek began his toast with practiced charm. He spoke about our 8 years together, about the journey we had shared, about the memories we had created. His voice was warm, his words beautiful. Anyone listening would have thought they were witnessing a devoted husband honoring his wife. I knew better. His tone shifted slightly, becoming more serious. He said that some journeys reach natural conclusions. He said that change, while difficult, was sometimes necessary. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document, placing it on the table in front of me. The room went silent. Everyone stared at the papers, then at me, confusion spreading across faces. Derek continued speaking, his voice cold, now stripped of pretense. He explained that these were divorce papers and that he had already arranged everything. I would sign them, and we would end this charade quietly. The assets were already distributed, he said. I should be grateful for the years he had given me. Greta smiled triumphantly. Simone covered her mouth in mock surprise. Derek's colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My friends stared at me with pity and shock. I picked up the papers and examined them calmly, as if reviewing a business document. Derek watched me with satisfaction, clearly expecting tears, or pleas, or some display of devastation. Instead, I set the papers down and took a sip of champagne. Then the main entrance opened and Celeste walked in. She was younger than I expected, pretty in an obvious way, blonde hair cascading over a dress that was trying too hard. She walked toward our table and stood beside Derek, slipping her arm through his. The statement was clear. This was his new woman. This was my replacement. Derek announced to the stunned guests that Celeste was the woman he truly loved. He said he had wasted enough years on a marriage that no longer served him. He told me to sign the papers and accept reality. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. Every eye in the room was fixed on me, waiting for my breakdown. I could feel Greta's satisfaction, Simone's glee, Derek's certainty that he had won. I lifted my glass. Thank you, Derek, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Thank you for giving me this perfect opportunity. I signaled to Thomas. A projection screen descended from the ceiling behind the head table. The guests turned confused as images began to appear. Photographs of Derek and Celeste, dates and locations, financial documents, property transfers, the forged loan applications with my name written in Derek's handwriting. I narrated as the images changed. I explained that Derek had been systematically stealing from our marriage for over 2 years. I showed the evidence of his fraud, his theft, his lies. I let everyone hear a recording of him laughing with Celeste about how naive I was, how easily manipulated, how she was so much better than me. Derek's face went pale. Celeste started backing away. Greta gripped the table edge, her composure crumbling. The guests watched in stunned silence. Harriet rose from her table and walked toward us, introducing herself as my attorney. She addressed Derek directly, listing the criminal charges he would face: property fraud, identity theft, financial fraud. His law license would be revoked. His career was finished. She handed him a counter-divorce filing one that claimed everything he had tried to steal and more. Derek tried to speak, to explain, to deny. His words came out jumbled and desperate. He turned to Celeste for support, but she was already heading for the exit, wanting no part of this disaster. He looked at his mother, but Greta was frozen in her seat, her triumph transformed into horror. I stepped closer to my husband, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "You thought you could destroy me," I said quietly. "You thought I was too stupid to notice, too weak to fight back. But I am not the naive woman you married 8 years ago. I am stronger than you ever understood. And I will never sign your papers. I will divorce you on my terms, and I will take everything you tried to steal from me." I turned to the assembled guests. I apologized for the dramatic evening. I thanked my true friends for their support. Then I gathered my purse and walked toward the exit, my head high, my shoulders straight. Nathan fell into step beside me as I left. Behind us, I could hear Derek shouting, Greta crying, the chaos of a carefully planned scheme falling apart completely. I did not look back. Outside, the evening air was cool and fresh. I took a deep breath, feeling something loosen in my chest. Paulette waited by a car ready to take me to the apartment I had secretly rented weeks ago. My bags were already there. My new life was waiting. I climbed into the car and closed the door on 8 years of lies. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Derek's position was indefensible. The evidence Nathan had gathered, combined with financial records Harriet subpoenaed, painted a damning picture of systematic fraud and deception. Derek hired expensive attorneys, but they could not argue against documented facts. The court reviewed everything with increasing disgust. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s who had seen countless divorce cases, seemed personally offended by Derek's behavior. She ordered all transferred assets returned to the marital estate. She invalidated the fraudulent property transfer and restored my name to the Back Bay apartment deed. She dismissed the loans taken in my name and referred the matter for criminal investigation. Derek's law firm terminated his partnership within 2 weeks of the restaurant incident. The Massachusetts Bar Association opened an ethics investigation that everyone knew would end his legal career. His professional reputation, built over 15 years, collapsed in a matter of days. Celeste disappeared from Boston entirely. She resigned from the firm and moved back to wherever she came from, her dreams of becoming a partner's wife evaporating in the scandal. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she blamed Derek for ruining her life, which I found ironically appropriate. The divorce was finalized 4 months after that anniversary dinner. I received the apartment, which I sold immediately. I received 70% of our remaining joint assets, which the judge awarded as compensation for Derek's fraud. I received a substantial settlement that Derek had to liquidate his remaining investments to pay. I walked away from my marriage wealthier than I had entered it, not because I married well, but because I fought well. Derek's family did not escape unscathed. Greta found herself suddenly unwelcome in certain social circles. Hostesses who had eagerly sought her presence now forgot to mail invitations. Old friends developed scheduling conflicts whenever she called. The shame of her son's exposure tainted her by association. Simone's marriage collapsed within 6 months. It turned out she had been conducting her own affair, a fact that emerged during the chaos of Derek's scandal. Her husband, a mild-mannered banker, filed for divorce immediately. Simone moved back into her mother's house, 2 disgraced women sharing bitter meals in uncomfortable silence. Derek himself hit bottom faster than I would have predicted. He sold his South End apartment to pay legal bills. He moved into a small rental in a neighborhood he would have considered beneath him months earlier. He sent me messages, occasionally apologetic texts, that I deleted without reading voicemails, that I erased without playing. He had nothing to say that I wanted to hear. Maggie published a carefully worded article about financial abuse in marriage that became widely shared online. She did not name me directly, but anyone who knew the story recognized the details. Hundreds of women reached out to share their own experiences. Some thanked me for speaking up. Others asked for advice on escaping similar situations. I had not intended to become a symbol, but I found purpose in the role. I started a blog on my firm's website writing about financial independence and protecting yourself in relationships. The response exceeded anything I anticipated. Women wrote to me from across the country sharing their fears and their plans and their small victories. I hired a consultant to help manage the correspondence. What began as my personal revenge became something larger, something that mattered beyond my own story. The first 6 months after my divorce were harder than I expected. The legal victory felt hollow some nights when I sat alone in my rented apartment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a new building. I had nightmares about Derek-twisted dreams, where he was still manipulating me, still lying, still winning. I would wake up disoriented, reaching for someone who was no longer there. I found a therapist named Dr. Brennan, who specialized in recovering from narcissistic relationships. Our sessions were difficult at first. I did not want to admit how deeply Derek had damaged me, how thoroughly he had eroded my confidence over the years. But Dr. Brennan was patient and skilled, guiding me through layers of trauma I had not even recognized. We explored how I had lost myself in my marriage, how I had shrunk to accommodate Derek's ego, how I had abandoned my own needs to keep peace. We talked about my father's death and how his loss made me vulnerable to anyone who promised protection and stability. We examined the patterns that allowed me to ignore warning signs, to excuse inexcusable behavior, to believe lies, because believing them was easier than facing truth. Healing was not linear. Some weeks I felt strong and optimistic. Other weeks I could barely function, weighed down by grief and anger and shame. I cried more in those first 6 months than I had in the previous 34 years combined. I let myself feel everything I had suppressed during the marriage, all the hurt and humiliation and loneliness. Gradually, something shifted. The nightmares became less frequent. The anxiety that gripped me whenever I saw a man who looked like Derek started to fade. I began to recognize myself again, the woman I had been before I met him, the ambitious girl from Ohio who built a life from nothing. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. My firm expanded, taking on new clients and new challenges. I hired additional staff and moved to larger offices with a view of the harbor. The success felt different now, more personal, more meaningful. I was not building for Derek's approval anymore. I was building for myself. I bought a house in a quiet suburb west of the city. It was nothing grand, a 3-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and mature trees. I painted the walls colors I loved and filled the rooms with furniture I chose. I planted a garden that first spring, tomatoes and peppers and herbs that I could see from my kitchen window. I adopted a dog from a local shelter, a sweet-natured golden retriever I named Maple. She followed me everywhere, slept at the foot of my bed, greeted me with boundless joy when I came home from work. The unconditional love of a dog sounds cliché until you experience it after years of conditional affection from a person who was supposed to love you most. My friendships deepened. Paulette came for dinner every few weeks, and we talked about everything except divorce law. I reconnected with college friends I had neglected during my marriage and formed new bonds with women I met through work and my neighborhood. Marcus, my business partner of 3 years, became a trusted confidant who understood both my professional and personal struggles. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I spent Sunday mornings reading on my porch. I took Maple for long walks through conservation land. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself, setting the table properly and eating slowly. I discovered that my own company could be comfortable, even enjoyable, once I stopped seeing solitude as failure. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I was sitting on my back deck watching the sunset. Maple was dozing at my feet. The air smelled like cut grass and approaching summer. I realized I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. I thought about Derek sometimes, but without the rage that once consumed me. He was out there somewhere, living whatever diminished life his choices had created. I did not wish him well, but I no longer wished him harm either. He had become irrelevant to my story, a painful chapter that I had closed and shelved. The lessons from my marriage were valuable even if the cost of learning them was steep. I understood now that love could be a mask for control. I recognized that my worth did not depend on anyone's validation. I knew that I could survive betrayal and emerge stronger, that the worst someone could do to me would not destroy me. I started dating again carefully, with standards that would have seemed unreasonable to my younger self. I walked away from men who showed even hints of the patterns I recognized from Derek. I trusted my instincts instead of overriding them with hope. Not every date led somewhere, and that was perfectly fine. I was not searching for completion. I was already complete. My blog grew into a small movement. I partnered with a nonprofit that helped women escape financial abuse in relationships. I gave talks at conferences and appeared on podcasts. My story, which I had initially considered a personal shame, became a tool for helping others avoid similar fates. Looking back, I can see how every hardship prepared me for the next challenge. Growing up poor taught me resilience. My father's death taught me independence. Building my business taught me strategy. And my marriage to Derek taught me that I was stronger than I knew, that betrayal could become fuel for transformation. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. You are not stupid for trusting someone who lied to you. You are not weak for loving someone who did not deserve it. You are not defined by the worst thing someone else did to you. You are defined by what you do next. I did not get a fairy tale ending. I got something better. I got a real life that I built with my own hands, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, doing work that matters. I got freedom from a man who wanted to own me. I got myself back. And honestly, that is the greatest revenge of all. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they are not alone. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength in difficult times. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, please share this video with them. Sometimes knowing that others have survived similar situations makes all the difference. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community where we support each other through life's hardest moments. Until next time, remember that you deserve love that does not require you to shrink. You deserve respect that does not come with conditions. You deserve a partner who celebrates your strength instead of trying to diminish it. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next story.